What's up, man? What's going on? Look at that grin on your face. What is happening with you today?
Well, I always start it and I'm like, Tom seems revved up today. Let me see if he's going to go. And you did.
Let's go. Let's get it started. I feel like sometimes you just got to jump right in, right?
I like it.
That's the way it is, man. How's it been? How you been today?
Today was an overwhelming day. It was just a lot of mindful usage over and over and over and over. We had me and you spend time working on the business. We had two different one-on-one clients, group coaching, really killing it in the gym. I'm doing a new program. So it was just like using my brain a lot today. And then I was very lucky. I had some time with my family, just me, my son, and my wife, and we got to sit and talk. And it was every man for themselves night. We do clean out the fridge.
Nice,
It's like
nice.
everyone made their own meal, and it was nice to talk not about business. My wife bitched and moaned about her day and her idiot, supervisors and this and that. And my son complained about this thing. It was great to just like, oh, I get to just listen. I don't have to solve your problems. It was nice.
I get accused of not solving their problems, right? It's so hard sometimes for me at night to be fully present. And I'll go in and they're talking to me and I'm not hearing anything. They're like, you listen to people all day. Why can't you listen to us? I say, because I listen to people all day and I need a minute. You want to talk and you need my attention. You have to draw my attention and you have to tell me, be very intentional. When it's amazing how I just change from one scene to the other.
Mm.
When I'm in my office, it's like I walk through this chamber of being very present, very focused on what we're doing. And then as soon as I leave that chamber, it's like all the rules are gone and everything else. So I've got to work on that a little bit. So
Well, we'll talk. I know a good coach.
all
All
right,
right.
let's get
So
into it.
Q&A, you know how the game is played. If you're listening, if you're watching, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. These are our members from our 5WH program, formerly known as Project 2740. We have a great gentleman here today. We know him as Bucci. We're going to have you, Mike, introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, and where they can find you, and then we'll go into our questions.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Mike Basili, but as you said, a lot of people call me Bucci. Been going by that for years. I am the owner and creator of MindWorks, which is a coaching program that primarily right now is helping people navigate career transitions. And that is done, through some practices around mindfulness and really self-discovery, because what I'm finding the key is in these career transitions is people need to get kind of back in touch with themselves a little bit and get back to that kind of their core and their core values as they look to do something different with their career. And I use the word career transitions on purpose because you can change jobs. That is different than a career transition where you having the internal state of kind of who you are and the intentions of what you're going to do next really transform, what you're doing. So that's what I work with people on. It's not about just getting the next job. There's other career coaches and such for that. But if you want a real transformation in the process of changing careers and changing your focus on where you're taking your life, that's what I work with.
Love it. And then where's the best place for them to find you if they want to learn more?
That's my hangout. That's where I spend all my time, not all my time, but all my time, meeting, different, potential clients. And, I put posts out there and write articles and such.
Great. All right, good. So we'll put Mike's handle in the show notes so you can find them. I'm sure Connor and Sam, our editors, will put it right up here on the screen as well. So, sometimes we have one person, sometimes we have two people, but you're a handful, Mike. And what I mean by that is you ask really, really insightful questions. Tom and I talked about you last night. We appreciate the additions that you give in our group sessions. And this is really how it has become a community, that everybody is here helping each other out. And some people are timid and shy, and some people are really aggressive. And there's others like you that kind of feel the moment. You understand the person. You add when it's needed. You'll interrupt like I do, and you'll shut up like I do. And I really appreciate the way that you go about carrying yourselves in our group. So we thought tonight we'd give the whole floor to you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, Adam, I honestly, I just want to say there, like that really what you said means a lot. And I want to tell you why kind of quickly, if I can. I started this program to help others because I was struggling, right? I was struggling with self-doubt. I was struggling with anxiety. I wanted to do something bigger with my life and I didn't know how. And the other thing that's really meaningful to what you said is that I was not like that. I have a career in sales. I was in software sales. I did also, I've sold some professional services, consulting, and I was the guy that needed to know everything and say everything. And I was, I perform well at sales, even though that, that's got to be 80% listening. That's the rule that we all know now. But, I always felt the need to kind of talk And as I've transformed and did that self-discovery, I discovered that kind of quieter part of myself that, that was that anxiety that was like talking all the time. And so I just want to point that out that if you knew me 5 years ago, you wouldn't have said those things.
Well, that also shows to your ability to help people transition, right? Most of what coaching is something that you had an epiphany on, whether you went through it yourself or you learned it in going and coaching yourself, or you read a book or you went to school. It's usually you're only a few steps ahead of the people that you're helping. And most people think these coaches need to be on this pedestal of they know everything. And guess what, folks? We don't know everything. We know a lot of things and we know very specific things very well, but that's how we all learn from each other and that's how we have the ability to grow. But it's good that you went through that yourself because then you can have that empathy for them as well. Yeah. So what things would you like to ask or would you like to talk about?
Yeah.
Like I said, the floor is yours today.
So Tom and I were just riffing before the call, just understanding some of the blockers and barriers to really jumping and doing this work, because you guys offer a lot, but maybe that's part of it. Maybe it is a lot, and maybe that's part of the overwhelm, and people don't know, like, it's hard to find where to engage. So I'd like to come to that, but maybe we'll start with the 5Ws, since that's like the kind of core component, right? And the big one for me is the when piece, because I'd like both of your perspectives, because like you have such unique perspectives. Because there's when is my business at a state where I need to jump in and do something about it? That's got to be one reason they call you. And then like from Tom, from your perspective, is like, what's the when someone is ready to kind of start to look at themselves and look at like, what's my role in the outcomes I'm getting? What's my role in, what things I'm putting my attention on or not? They must conflate at some point for coming here, I would imagine. But maybe not. And that's what I'm curious about, your experience with the when side of things.
Yeah. So Tom, why don't you take that one from the start and then I'll jump in a second.
Yes. So, when do people need us? And when do they need more of that life transition piece? It's really simple from my perspective. It's when they feel the most stuck that they have felt. Okay. A lot of people come when they really recognize, oh my goodness, I am not moving at all. I'm not moving forward. Everything is the same. I don't know why it's the same. I can't figure it out. I'm not sure what to do. And in the past, I've always had very difficult time asking for help. So that is what I see as a big thing. And a lot of times people will talk with Adam and I on an initial call, and they don't even realize that the when for me is already there. They may have the when in their business, and then I also will help, in that conversation to help them to recognize, well, you need me too, because you're really struggling with this issue, or you have this sabotaging habit that I'm identifying, or the way you're just talking is limiting you from all of the possibilities that you experience. It's the same thing like when I first started coaching. Like, I'm going to go back for a second, and how I even allowed myself to get here was, when I first started coaching, I was doing very similar to you, career transition and relationship transition. And the way I came into that is I started as career transition, but a lot of the people I was starting to meet, they didn't need a career transition. They needed a marriage transition, or they needed a relationship transition, because they felt that the career was more controllable and it was the thing that they could control better than controlling the relationship and fixing that, right? And it's the same thing when Adam and I come together and talking to a business owner. It's like, do you realize that everything that you're saying is not allowing you to execute on everything that you're trying to do from a business perspective? And I think that's what really helps them to understand when they need me, is really through when they think that their business is in a place that has not moved, or when they're stuck, or when they're plateaued in their revenue. Because behind all of that is all of the sabotaging habits, limiting beliefs, and stuff like that. So that's my perspective on that.
Yep. When I look at when, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've been doing the 5WHs for over 2 decades. It's wild. Many different modalities, many different intentions. And what's really come from me is separating the when and what we call who has motivation or desire. And what most people are really looking for is they're looking for the person that's ready to work with them right now. And that's who has motivation to start working, to start whatever it is you do, for your instance, coaching. And that's what most of us look for, because then that means we get to do the work and get paid to do that work. The impatience that people have to recognize the when first is what usually leads to people talking and trying to convince someone that they are ready to work with them. So when I look at this, it's the when is when they really should be working with you, when they really do need you. It doesn't mean that they're ready. It means that the circumstance says this is a good time for us to be working together. Their individual circumstance may not lend to them being able to start working with you, whether that be mentally, physically, or financially. So we have to first start with understanding, okay, this is when they need us. And then we have to go confirm or uncover that, okay, they have the motivation to actually do this thing now. So when it comes to coaching, I look at, and I'll go, instead of going for us specifically, I'll talk more generically about coaching. So coaching in a variety of ways, whether it's life coaching, career transition coaching, business coaching, marriage coaching, whatever it may be. I look at, there's usually the when is when there's a work-life balance issue. Right? And you know how much Tom and I don't like the word work-life balance, but most people have an imbalance to themselves of what their expectations are. What we do as coaches is help them work through that and understand that there can be a harmony of it. But when they start to recognize, I have this work-life balance issue. We were just chatting it up before this about how I got to spend time with my family this morning, or actually that was in the beginning of this podcast. I got to spend time with my son and my wife today. That's a harmony, okay? That's not a balance. It's not like, okay, well, I spent that much time with them. Now I need to go spend this much time on work to even the scale. Okay, so I usually look at, okay, that is when. Now that doesn't mean just because they have an imbalance that they're ready to work with you. That means that this is when maybe they should consider working with you, but are they ready mentally? Are they ready financially? Are they ready physically? And there's a variety of other ones. Relationship issues come up, goal setting, like they finally set the goals. And I don't mean New Year's resolution goals. That's kind of BS for most people. I mean, they've actually set a goal. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to change my business. I'm going to change something. Okay. And then we could always look at the people who need the accountability, right? They've tried things and they haven't had success, or they've went out there and attempted to do something and they had the commitment to do it, but they didn't have success because they can't stick to it. That accountability is usually when they need the coaching, because coaching is a support system and an education system combined in one, and that's really how I look at it. But the key for me is don't skip over, are they ready to work with me? You have to first see, is it when they should? Does that explain it for you?
100%. You know what? It actually just solidified how much power is in the when, because another question I was going to ask you both is, I know I felt this, and a lot of people I know in the group feel this. Like I was in sales a long time, and I still have that feeling of like you're not pushing people, right? And you don't want to, feel like you're being pushy. That's like a common thing. But if you have the when right, then it feels better, because it's and there's nudges, and they're all kind of like very like healthy ways to just help people get over the line or make a decision maybe that they're afraid to make or whatever. Like you could, in my business, you could start coaching right away, and that might be coaching them through that process. But you can't do it too early. If they're not there, then you are pushing. You don't push me into where it like, let me come in my own time. So can you like dovetail into like that pushiness resistance and like how when might help alleviate that need?
I'll give you a strange analogy because it just happened to me today for like the 10th time over the last week. When I get in my car, it has all the bells and the whistles, and it tells me you need to get an oil change because it says the oil life. Now what happens is I put synthetic oil in my car, which has a longer life than the normal oil the manufacturer requires. So my mechanic says, no, this is when you need to change your oil. But my car is telling me, no, this is when you need to change it. But I don't have the motivation to, because I have other knowledge. So my car is very pushy. Every day it gets in there like, hey, you need to change your oil. And I got to hit a button and say, no, I don't. To the car, it's when I should change my oil. It's right around when, but I don't have motivation because I know what's going to cause me. And it's a certain number that gives me now the motivation of, I got to call the mechanic and say, hey, we're coming in today. I need a car, exchange. So that is a silly example, but a very tangible one that I'm sure many of you have experienced. It's like something or someone is telling you, this is when you need to do it. But you're like, no, I actually don't. The motivation for me can come from if my wife drives that car and says, the oil light's coming on, we're going to ruin the car, it's going to come. And I'm like, you know what? Instead of her dealing with this, I'm just going to go get it changed. That may be my motivation to do it. My real motivation will be when the certain number comes up and I have 100 miles left and I call a mechanic and do that. So the motivation for me is a deadline. So deadlines are big motivators for many, many people. That outside pressure is a big motivator for many, many people. Now, here's the thing. When you can apply pressure and convince people to do it right now. Okay, so now some may look at that as manipulation and a negative thing, but sometimes you need to just change your oil. And someone's got to be like, I'm going to motivate you today. So just because someone doesn't have the motivation, you can help them find the motivation. Okay, you don't want to give them the motivation if it's not when they should do it. So that's what I meant about being impatient. Sometimes people are so good at selling people, they convince someone there and they motivate them to do the thing, but it's not when they need it. And then at some point after the purchase, they have this buyer's remorse because like, I really didn't need it. Why did I do this? The guy sold me on it and he motivated me to do it, but I didn't need it. And that's not a good relationship, especially in the service-based business that is ongoing, right? We never want that feeling. We want them to confirm with us, yeah, you're right, it is when, and oh my goodness, I am motivated. Okay, let's work together. And that is simply meeting them where they're at instead of pulling them to where you want them to be.
I think that's a key point, is meeting the person where they are at. And you, Mike, as a coach, most of the time people, when they reach out to us to look into coaching, they're like 25% of the way already there, right? When they get referred to us, they're 50% of the way there. So it really depends on the situation, on how much of a quote unquote sale do you have to make. But if you're already there, there is something inside of you that is demonstrating some motivation to do something different. And I think that some of the times where things get pushy is when somebody doesn't recognize that this person is just exploring and looking for options versus this person is really ready to get down and get dirty and get busy and work. It really depends. Like, it's so circumstantial, but if you're not self-aware when you're making that sale, engaging where the person is, then that becomes the bigger challenge, because then you become pushy. Then it's all about the money, the money, the money. And a lot of times it's your hyperachiever that kicks in to get to the money, right? That hyperachiever saboteur just wants the result, just wants to close the deal, make the deal happen. And I think that's what makes people push. But if you could recognize where the person really is at, what do they want? What do they really need? What are they really exploring? And always focus on what do they really need, not necessarily what they want, so that you can help meet them even closer to where they are. And, Adam uses this term all the time. He says, use their words against them, but not in a negative way, but to actually help them. And if you can help them recognize that they're much further along in the process of it being when, then you could be ready to close the deal and you can bring the right person in. But, I practiced medicine for so long, and I practiced a lot of models called harm reduction. And harm reduction is meeting people where they're at to determine what the real improvement is, right? It's not alcohol abstinence. It's not drug abstinence. It's not chocolate cake abstinence. It's, all right, instead of having a whole cake, I'm going to have a half a cake, and then I'm going to have a quarter of a cake, and then I'm going to have an eighth of a cake. But it's working that back to where it becomes more comfortable for that person. And that's what provides trust in the beginning of your relationship with that client, especially meeting them where they are, because then you can respect where they are and you become very self-aware and help them understand where they are.
Yeah, I love that, Tom, because especially that analogy or just process of like having things, the way I look at that is you're helping them build tolerance to a new feeling. Because I was used to eating the whole cake. I got to get used to eating only half the cake and give me some I don't want to go from whole to zero. That's a big shift in like my experience. But if you help me build some tolerance here, and I think it's the same way, the more tolerance we build to some discomfort as we, create new offers or meet new people or what have you, like we got to just do that one step at a time. So we build that, that muscle and that tolerance. I think that's really helpful.
100%.
This is what I was talking about with you with the insights, like the fact that you pulled out that tolerance thing, because it's a very interesting way to look at it. What I found recently, I don't know where I got this, but they were looking at philosophers and people who had wisdom throughout our history. And what came about was they said that the wisest people, when they are conveying how to be wise, most of their advice or their recommendations are on what not to do. It's not telling you to do things. It's telling you what to avoid, what to not do. And that actually is having a tolerance, I can go up, this is how much I can have, but a tolerance of like, Okay, I'm not going to do this. And that is kind of that piece. And that really is what we practice and preach in our 5 Ws is trying to refine things down to, okay, I'm only going to do this, which in turn means I'm not going to do that. Right. So it's an interesting way to look at that in tolerance. This is why I always enjoy speaking with you. You think of things differently.
Yeah, and what is tolerance, right? I think this is such a great spinoff here because tolerance is as your body gets used to something, okay, it builds a tolerance. And then you have to have more of that thing to have the same effect. And that's what a lot of this is that you have a tolerance for, you've reached a certain point, and now we've got to reduce that and go in the reverse order and take away the thing that you don't need and fill it in with things that you really do need. And by meeting a person where they're at, you build this new tolerance for things that they are lacking and haven't had, and now have the ability to develop what exactly it is that they need by removing the thing that built this false tolerance, so to speak, right? So that it just, so thank you for that spinoff, Mike. That was awesome. This is why we said we had to have Mike on by himself, because he's going to get both of us thinking, and this is just the way it's going to be.
All right, so we got about 5 minutes left. What else could we answer for you, Mike?
Well, maybe we'll spin it back, Tom, just to, and I think it's all related of like, so there's a lot, that this program offers. That you've got all the kind of education and courses. There's some other coaches in fitness and sales and other arenas, but sometimes people maybe aren't as engaged. And, there's got to be some of these elements we're all talking about here at play. Like, do you have a sense of like where the engagement, like where someone's at, that they're engaged or not engaged?
Yeah. that It's a constant battle. Go ahead, Adam.
No, well, what I was going to say is obviously when people first come in, they're super engaged. It's like anything. It's like a relationship, and it's like a activity you're going to take on. They're like, woo, this is exciting. And then what I do specifically is I really put a lot of pressure on people to get serious about something, right? So we talk about CEO mindset often, and it's commitment, effort, obsession. When they come in, they're a little bit obsessed, and then they start giving the commitment, and they realize, this is more work than I've ever done in my life. And it's a lot of pressure. So all of a sudden, that pleasurable experience becomes painful. And that is exactly why we have Tom, okay? Because I'm putting that pressure on, because I can give you all the tactics in the world, but if you don't do them, they're not going to work. So in the first month, Tom's talking about sabotaging behaviors, these habits that we have formed and we've gotten used to and are familiar, that we can rest on and go back on. And that's what we find most people do. Is when the pressure gets on there, when they start to really feel it's tense now, they go back to the old way of doing things. And here's why the engagement drops, Mike. When they go back to doing things and now they know the way they could do things, they feel a little embarrassed. So the engagement goes down because they know we're going to call them on their shit. And I am a detective. I will uncover what's actually going on, and then they will have to deal with it. And they're smart enough folks. We don't let anybody in these groups. Some people slip through the cracks, but almost everybody here is pretty darn smart that they already know what the problem is. And they're like, oh my gosh, Tom's going to make me deal with this. Oh my gosh, Adam's going to say it in front of everybody else, and I'm not going to have an answer. So I'm going to go in the corner and kind of hide and like do what I got to do. Then what happens is they have an experience, Mike. Something happens. I don't know what session it's in. I don't know what activity it is. It could be on their own. It could be with somebody else. And a light bulb goes off and it gets reinvigorated. And it's not just a result. It's a clarity. It's an understanding. It's this realization of like, holy cow, that was what I've been looking for. I just didn't know it was 6 inches in front of my face. And then the engagement kicks back up again. So we do see this cycle. Good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And listen, we uncover the saboteurs in the very beginning for that reason too, because people realize, oh shit, I have more that I have to really work on personally before I can really be that business owner. I can really attack this stuff. And I didn't realize, again, going back to the when, they don't realize that was when this is what they really needed. They didn't need the business piece necessarily. And now they're avoiding, and their restless is kicking in. This is too uncomfortable and I got to go do something else. And maybe I'll go find a different group that's going to allow. And this is why, this was one of my biggest resistances to group coaching, because Adam and I, this is the first time we're running a group coaching, and we never wanted to do it. I always wanted that one-on-one, because I have never had a client not show up for a one-on-one session. It has never happened in 6 years of coaching. They never blew me off. But here in a group setting, it's easier to blow you off because there's other people there and I can sneak away. Yeah, and the show's still going to go on. Exactly. And it's kind of funny, but it is, in anything that we do, we've always noticed in that 6 to 8 week period is typically when that aha happens, right? But you got to give it the first 6 to 8 weeks. You got to be patient. You got to show up consistently, do the work for at least that first 6 to 8 weeks so that you can get the aha. If you don't do that work, you don't get it and it doesn't happen. And then it just causes you either to fade away or to really get really strong and recommit to exactly what you're doing.
Well, that's the issue. A lot of times, if the engagement falls off so much, whether that's engaging with us, engaging with the work, engaging with the tactics, engaging with themselves, which is the most important one, when that falls off, we have to sometimes restart. We have had people, we have 3 phases. We've had people get to the end of, move into phase 2, and we're like, you really have to go back. We have a gentleman, Will, that has been with us. We started him all the way over from scratch. The reason why he accepted that is because he did have that aha moment. And he's like, wait a minute. If I realize this and I want to do that, I need to reanalyze everything I've done. And we're like, I'm glad you recognize that because this was a hard conversation to have with him. And we reset him and he has thrived since he's done that. So yeah, that's a great question. We do have to wrap up.
I love that too, because sometimes we got to just try a path and we got to have that, especially if you're working like in a group like this, where you get other perspectives and you got a couple, very established coaches here. That it's like, okay, you say this, I think sometimes, Adam, like 60, 90 days, that's not forever, but that's good enough time to give you information to make a decision. Do I double down on this or do I do and resets are okay. Sometimes and oftentimes hugely beneficial, because why are you going to keep going down the same path?
Exactly.
All right, Mike, I hope people reach out and find you, and I hope they found some of what the questions you've asked inspiring and the additions you gave here, because this is what you are doing in your work. And if you need a career transition, as we've worked with many career transition coaches, Mike he has a different compassion and empathy than I've seen most have. And it's not that he went to school to do this and figure out how to do this. He actually just knows how to do it through life experience and yes, through education. But Mike, thanks again for coming on here and being with us. And we'll see everybody next week.